Hello, my friends. Hello, 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 hello. Okay, I'm supposed to slow down, slow down, slow down, slow down. You're moving too fast. You got to make the moment last. Just kicking down the cobblestone. Do, feeling groovy. Ba-da-da-da-da-da-da, feeling groovy. And that's about it. And that's about all the singing you're gonna get. Maybe. Oh wait. I think there is a little bit of singing here. You know, I gotta look up lyrics real quick. Hold on. Dreadster. Dread, I think we're going to do a little bit of singing here today. And then we're gonna get started here in a second. Sorry about this pause here. I'm looking up lyrics to express yourself. And I can't find the chorus. And that's what I'm looking for. Dread. So if you want it right now, we can show you. Oh, man. Okay, so that's that. All right, I'm going to start rocking and rolling here with what I learned this week. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for tuning in, Dread, and one other person who's here. I appreciate it. 1, 2, 3. Hello, my friends, and happy weekend. Welcome to another episode of What I Learned This Week. So, it's been a great week. It's been a fun week. I was just Googling something that I'm going to talk about here in a couple minutes that you're probably going to wish I didn't talk about. But, whatever. Let's go for it. So we're diving this week into what I learned this week. And this is a combination of the book I'm reading, The Good Neighbor by Maxwell King, The Life and Work of Fred Rogers. The book I'm currently reading, Where the Red Fern Grows, which I'm talking about on AMXKids. As well as our interview with my friend, this was a fun one. I'm very fortunate and blessed to come from a town in which I grew up with some really neat, interesting people who have gone into various neat ventures in life, and I've been able to have them on the show. This is probably my, 4th or 5th childhood friend that's been on the show, so it's really neat. But my friend Rich, who is a plasma physicist, super smart guy, but it's a combination of science and it's a combination of rehashing old times, but it's a very fun, lighthearted conversation, but it is also scientific. That was the point of it. I read that book, Astrophysics for People in a Hurry by Neil deGrasse Tyson, and I thought, well, Rich is a physicist, different type of physicist, but heck, it's physics. It's close enough for me. But it was a tremendous week of learning. This book that I'm reading, The Good Neighbor by Maxwell King, it's a tremendous book. It, not only, for me, I like it for a variety of reasons. Maybe first and foremost what jumps out is this teaching. I have 2 little kids, and it's teaching me a lot about parenting. It's teaching me a lot about how to interact with my kids and reinforce ways to behave and things to do and the importance of this and that. So for me personally, as a father of young kids, that's probably the most important. Also, it's just interesting to learn where Mr. Rogers' neighborhood came from, how it evolved, how it developed, the ups and the downs. Another aspect is learning about him. It's really interesting and neat whenever you're able to jump inside the life of really successful people, because you realize, honestly, most of the time you realize, hey, they're just like me. They're just like you, except they do this one thing a lot. Or maybe they do these 5 things a lot. And it's really interesting to sit back and get a whole picture of it. But then another element, which I guess is a 4th element, is he's a really smart guy. And it's interesting to hear, this is a biography, not autobiography, but it's interesting to hear his words. The author does a great job of bringing in Mr. Rogers' colleagues, bringing in past interviews, concepts, etc. So it's a tremendously valuable book, and for where I'm at in my life, especially, it's valuable. But I would highly recommend if Mr. Rogers, you had anything to do with him in your youth, and/or Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood. If you're a parent and you hear Daniel Tiger, it is Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. Daniel the Tiger was brought to the show, and we learned the history of that. Fascinating. All these books I talk about, all these things I talk about, are on my website, charliespaniard.com/reading list. So let's jump into the first bullet point of this week's What I Learned document. Quote, this is coming from The Good Neighbor. Quote, Fred was always careful to manage his own time in the most thoughtful and deliberate way, and he honed his unique ability to focus on what was important to him, undistracted by his family and friends. This was one of those areas to which I was pointing when I said that. You learn how they operate and how they tick. Undistracted by his family and friends. Think about that. Think of your family and friends tugging you to go in this direction or that direction. And a lot of times it's pressure, peer pressure. I don't know if family pressure is called peer pressure, but you get it. But you have this vision of where you want to go, but then people are kind of taking you off course, right? You have your true north, to use Joe DeSena's idea. You have your true north, but people are distracting you. People are pulling you away from your true north. And in the book, it's very, very honest picture of Mr. Rogers, his very good traits, what some people thought of him in a negative way, but this man had a mission, and it was never forgotten in his work and in his words and in his deeds. This mission was never forgotten. So it says he was always careful to manage his own time, undistracted by his family and friends. Think about that. How easy is it to become distracted by family and friends? Come on, you can do it. Come on, Charlie, we're on vacation. Seriously, dude, we're on vacation. Seriously, honey, we're on vacation. Leave your books at home. Leave your phone at home. I don't know. I'm not even speaking from experience. I'm just hypothetically speaking here. But two things that jumped in my mind here were prioritize and execute. Remember that extreme ownership term? One of the laws of combat, prioritize and execute. Prioritize those things and do them. Don't be distracted. Put them on a pedestal. And another thing that I really like, this idea of, if it's not a hell yes, it's a no. If it's not a hell yes, it's a no. So use these three kind of philosophies: being undistracted by family and friends, managing your time in thoughtful and deliberate ways as one of them, prioritize and execute as another example, and if it's not a hell yes, it's a no. Look, there's the answers that you're looking for, the answers that I'm looking for, the answers that everyone are looking for. They're principles and ideas that you have to put in action. Nobody can put in action anything for any of us. So it's really up to us to listen, absorb, believe, and then do. Moving on, again, from The Good Neighbor by Maxwell King. Quote, in ways that no one else, except possibly his wife Joanne, understood. I've been talking a lot about this lately. So in ways that no one else, except possibly his wife Joanne, understood, Fred Rogers was driven by the need to find outlets for his powerful creativity. I've been thinking about this a lot, and I realized lately the value that Dredd brings to my life. So Dredd is my partner in the business. Dredd is my friend. He's my peer. He's also kind of like an uncle. He's also kind of like a therapist to me. He really is. He's kind of a Yoda to me. And I realize how beneficial it is for me to express myself, mainly the frustrations of building a business, to him on a regular basis. So that's one area of expressing yourself. But then another, this podcast, people say all the time, oh my gosh, you've produced so much content. Really, I'm just hitting record on my life. That's it. I'm hitting record on my life. This to me is therapy. Reading a book, conceptualizing the book, talking about the book, processing the book, that's therapy to me. This is a creative outlet for me. This is an outlet as a human, rather than walking around with my mouth shut, my eyes looking forward, never expressing anything about me. That's just like you're getting ready to burst at the seam. I really align with this idea of Mr. Rogers wanting to find creative outlets or outlets for his creativity. That was a quest of his. That's what he did. Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, the show, is the manifestation of Mr. Rogers' childhood and his wants for other children, to not feel how he felt, to be able to provide for them a place of comfort and encouragement and support and belief and hope. That's exactly what he did, is found a way to express himself. Now, this is that moment that I'm choosing to create an awkward situation. For some reason, I feel compelled to tell you that Mr. Rogers was driven by the need to find outlets to express himself, and I will sing it right now. Express yourself, hey, hey, hey. So if you want it right now, make him show you how. Express what he's got, oh baby, ready or not. So find a way to express yourself. I did Google those lyrics because I didn't know them off the top of my head. Okay, moving on. So scratch that one, fast forward it, delete it, however you can. Moving on to the next bullet point. On this week's AMXKids. Gosh, I love AMXKids. You know, I'm really inspired by Mark Merrow. Mark Merrow is my friend, former WWE wrestler, America's #1 school presenter. This guy posts as much content as I produce. Basically, he's doing live events, and it is inspiring the heck out of me. And not only the fact that he, look, there's a quote. I'm going to get my notebook out real quick. There's a quote that I wrote down today. I didn't use it today on today's AMX, but I wanted to notate it. So I live in Hershey, outside of Hershey, PA. So I go to Hershey Park and Hershey Chocolate World often. And there's a big poster. There's a big, not a poster, a mural on the wall of Milton Hershey, and it says this: one is happy in proportion as he makes others happy. One is happy in proportion as he makes others happy. Tying this to AMXKids, tying this to Mark Merrow, I watch what Mark Merrow does, and it makes me happy for a lot of reasons. One, because he's my friend. I love seeing him succeed. I love his message. He helps me. He's a mentor to me. But also, I think it's a direct reflection as to the value, the happiness that he brings other people. And it's young people. It's youth. So tying this to AMXKids, I love doing AMXKids. I truthfully don't know how many kids are listening, but I believe in the truth of AMXKids. I believe that it can help kids, whether it's like Mr. Rogers creating his neighborhood or Mark Merrow with his school presentation. I have the belief that there's one kid that's listening to those episodes saying, thank you. This is a place where I feel comfortable. That's the vision I have. Just like Scott Adams when he creates books and comics, and Lady Gaga whenever she, early in her career, listened to the 1%ers. Scott Adams listened to the 2%ers. That's what drives me. AMXKids is that truth. AMXKids is the truth of hope and belief and comfort, and it's okay. And I'm talking to kids. I don't know if kids are listening. I know at least one adult is listening. Dred, thank you very much. But these books, for me, it's an opportunity to talk to and teach youth. But for me, it's also an opportunity to relearn these lessons that are buried so deep in these books. It's gold. These kids' books are written to teach life, period. They are written to teach life. Now, when you're a middle schooler reading those books, the majority, I'll speak for myself, but I'm going to comfortably say the majority, they don't realize it. I didn't realize Where the Red Fern Grows teaches life lessons. I didn't realize Hatchet was teaching me a life lesson. I just thought it was a book that had a cool cover and sounded cool when I flipped the pages, and or a book I had to read for class. AMXKids is a valuable tool for you and for your youth. Trust me, I'm creating it. I know what I'm learning through this process of reading these books. It's a tremendous tool, and I just hope to goodness that you utilize it. Whew, okay, moving on to the next AMX. This is again coming from the Mr. Rogers book. This was an instant. So Mr. Rogers, for a period, he explored a lot. So it wasn't just, not everything just worked for him, right? Everything wasn't magic and gold for him. He had to try, he failed, he tried this, tried that, this worked, this didn't work. But for a stint, he had a show on NBC, so he'd have to go to New York. But when you get bigger, and this is interesting because Dred and I talk a lot about this behind the scenes, like what exactly do we want to grow the show? Okay, well, when you grow the show, Other people become involved, boards become involved, other people assume control. You hear stories, I don't know if you hear stories, I hear stories of people who found companies who then get fired. Steve Jobs is a perfect example. It's like, well, wait a minute, this is your thing. How did you get fired? So the point is, growth is not always good. Growth can reach a point where it becomes retro, right? Like a negative return, return on growth, ROG, right? A negative return on growth. But what Mr. Rogers experienced one time when he was working with NBC, he said the word God. And they asked him to not say the word God on television. And he resisted because he thought, well, this is true to who I am and it's something I'd like to say. But following that, within that realm of the reading, he said this, quote, "You can be an agent of what's good and not be terribly direct about it." You can be an agent of what's good and not be terribly direct about it. So I think this is a really important lesson because I have beliefs. Look, the belief I shove down your throat is the power of reading. So someone could call me a hypocrite and say I'm not, or I am terribly direct about it. I believe in the goodness and the truth of wisdom, which is, I guess, my defense. I'm thinking out loud here. But I think it's really neat for him to read that. You can be an agent of what's good and not be terribly direct about it, to remind us of perspective, that other people don't think what we think. I'm actually listening to a book, Girl Wash Your Face by Rachel Hollis. It's a book written for women. I'm reading it because it's a great growth experience. But we're talking about perspective and understanding other people's perspectives, and they don't think what you think. So you can be an agent of what's good and not be terribly direct about it. You don't have to shove it down people's faces. You can live it. And I think Mr. Rogers does us a great example of that. Interesting to note here that Rogers focused more so on humanistic values versus one religion or another. He was Presbyterian, but he believed in truth. He believed in goodness, and he focused more so on humanistic values versus one theology or another. And this is interesting too. He was very disinterested in debates. Society today is debates. Everything, this or that. Even this diet versus that diet. Well, that diet's terrible. My diet's bad. This religion, this thing, bop, bop, bop. He was completely disinterested. It's interesting in the book. They bring out in the open the comparisons that Sesame and Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood always got. People just feel compelled to compare and contrast. This better than that. This is why it's better than that. Mr. Rogers was totally disinterested in it. He was focusing on the humanistic values. Moving on, Fred was taught the guided drift concept by his seminary professor, Dr. William Orr. I thought this was really neat. The idea of a guided drift. Okay, a guided drift. Imagine yourself, unless you're driving and or on a treadmill. How about this? If you're sitting down, close your eyes. Imagine a guided drift. And this is the analogy, the metaphor they used in the book, the picture, the visual. You're floating down a stream. You're steering left and right. But ultimately, you're being carried along by something bigger than you. Okay, you're being carried along by this force. So Fred was taught this idea of the guided drift concept by his seminary professor, Dr. William Orr. And it says, quote, "One needed to live a life that was open to change and serendipity, that embraced the possibilities of life rather than the confines of a rigid set of rules, that we are guided by our principles, but are free to also embrace the flow of life." So it's living within these parameters. I hear sometimes, or I'm aware of the fact that I change, okay? If you have a growth mindset and you're always striving to improve, then you will change. It's default. You will change if you truly believe in this. Improvement, right? Continuous improvement. You will change. But I like to think of it as it's within the confines of my moral and my moral compass, the principles by which I live. The details, the small stones, the small pebbles may change, but the big rocks, the discipline, the loyalty, the honesty, the hard work, the sacrifice, the perseverance, the family, importance of fitness, knowledge, those things are there all the time. And what this idea, the guided drift, is saying is, what I interpret it is as saying is that stream is the big rocks. Okay, you're in this stream of the big rocks. The little rocks, you're able to change, you're able to adjust, you're able to try new things, you're able to embrace the possibilities of life rather than the confines of a rigid set of rules. This is discipline, not rigid. If we're going back to the dichotomy of leadership, that idea, disciplined, not rigid. Disciplined, meaning these are the parameters by which I live. Not rigid, meaning I only live this way. But you're able to mix and match within those principles. I think that's a really neat concept. And it's something that I'm still struggling with words to put succinctly in most efficiently, but I hope that's at least enough to kind of get you thinking in that direction. Do a little bit of Googling. Do Guided Drift, Dr. William Orr. Moving on to Thursday's interview episode with my buddy. This is such a fun episode. Rich and I go back to, I'm trying to think of the first time I met him. I mean, junior high wrestling. We went skiing a lot together. It was just as fun. It's just a fun conversation, but it is based on and for the purpose of science, exploring his physics background. He's a plasma physicist. I asked him if he had read the book Astrophysics for People in a Hurry. He said no, but I'll read it. So he actually got the book and read it in preparation for this interview. So we have a fascinating conversation about physics, about life, about our old times. But this will get you into why I'm fascinated by the book Astrophysics for People in a Hurry, why I was fascinated by this conversation with Rich. So Rich's words, quote, "At the end of the day, we're just trying to gain understanding where there currently is not one. That's the most fun thing. Not only that you personally didn't know at the offset, but that no human before you has ever known." This is my favorite part. "To add a morsel of knowledge to the human canon is the ultimate goal. That's what really gives you the most satisfaction. To add a morsel of knowledge to the human canon is the ultimate goal." So in this episode, you're going to learn about physics in general. You're going to learn about what he does specifically and what he is attempting to do. It's a fascinating interview. If you're scared of science like I am, trust me, I went in with a dummy mindset and I asked the questions, but I really and truly believe that you will enjoy this episode. And the last one, and this is something that patted me on the shoulder and said, "You're doing okay." And also smacked me right on the forehead to say, yes, 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 I want other people to hear this. Dr. Margaret McFarland, who was Mr. Rogers' mentor, she was a child psychologist. She is at this time, was at the forefront of child development and psychology. She says, quote, "Attitudes aren't taught, they're caught. If the teacher has an attitude of enthusiasm for the subject, the student catches that." Do you hear that? Attitudes aren't taught, they're caught. So my question to you is, what are you teaching? What is your attitude teaching? What is your attitude showing the people around you? Because they're receiving what you're teaching. They're receiving what you're putting out there. To an artist she invited to her class. Okay, so she was also a professor at Pitt. She invited an artist to her class, and the artist said, "Well, what do you want me to do?" They were talking about sculpting. He said, "Well, how do you want me to teach sculpting?" And she said this. This is might be one of my favorite sentences in this book. 2 sentences. She said to the sculptor, "I don't want you to teach sculpting. All I want you to do is love clay in front of the children." How profound. How awesome is that? I don't want you to teach sculpting. All I want you to do is love clay in front of the children. I think a lot about this. So Dred and I talk about this behind the scenes. The most value, what I want to do is not teach you a fact. I want to teach you to love to learn. That's it. I can teach you 1,000 million facts. But what I want is for you to catch my enthusiasm for learning and want to learn. All I want to do is love learning so that you will love learning. That's what I do with all of my soul. That's what I'll continue to do with my soul. And I highly encourage you to open your eyes, open your ears, and consider that. In its most basic form, right here, right now, consider reading a book. I have a whole list of books, 80 or 90 books on my website. charliespaniard.com/reading list. Look at those books. Pick a book. Get started. Start to understand. Start to feel. Start to live the power that learning, that continuous lifelong learning will give you. Don't teach them sculpting. All I want you to do is love clay in front of them. If you're trying to influence anyone, if you're a young parent like myself, love living, love learning, love doing. And that's what your kids are going to see, and that's what your kids are going to catch. Whew. This has been what I learned this week. I sincerely appreciate you tuning in. That's it, folks. I got nothing more. You have my reading list, social media, new episodes all the time, every day. Subscribe to The Spaniard Show on iTunes, podcast app, and that's that. Don't forget the fitness episodes as well. You're looking for workouts? I just said that's it. I have nothing, and then I said 10 things. I'm out. See ya. Oh, no more singing, Dread. No more singing. Okay, we're gonna wrap this one up. I'm gonna say goodbye to Yuns, and then I'm gonna be, I don't know, I don't know if I'm gonna do it on here or Twitter, but I'm gonna record yeah, I got the fitness episode. Got a rebound. I'll see you guys in a bit.